Prince Myshkin, the protagonist of Dostoevsky's The Idiot, embodies the ideal of goodness, innocence, and purity. He is a man who deeply believes in honesty, kindness, and compassion, with not a single trace of deceit or manipulation in his character. His intentions are always sincere, and he holds an unwavering belief in the inherent goodness of human nature. However, his refusal to conform to the social norms of his time leads to a tragic fate. Instead of being admired for his virtues, Myshkin becomes a figure of ridicule and mockery. His honesty and openness, typically considered commendable in an ideal world, are seen as weaknesses in the cruel and self-serving reality of the society he lives in. He is viewed not as a noble prince, but as an idiot, a label that reflects how society perceives those who do not play the game of manipulation, power, and deceit. His life becomes a stark example of the tragic consequences that can arise from staying true to one's ideals in a world that values cunning, competition, and personal gain over kindness and integrity. In the world of the idiot, society is portrayed as one where individuals are constantly maneuvering for power, status, and personal advantage. Those who succeed are often not the kindest or most honest, but those who can navigate the complex web of human relationships with skillful manipulation and ruthlessness. Myshkin, in contrast, remains entirely unguarded and open, unwilling to disguise his true self or hide his pure intentions. This makes him vulnerable, as the people around him take advantage of his goodness and naivety, seeing him as a fool. His purity of heart, far from being an asset, becomes a liability in a world where social interactions are often calculated and transactional. Myshkin's fate underscores a painful truth about human nature. True goodness, in its unadulterated form, is often misunderstood and unappreciated. Rather than being celebrated, it is viewed as naive, weak, and even dangerous. In a world that values results and power, goodness without manipulation is seen as impractical. The more Myshkin tries to bring light into the lives of those around him, the more they see him as an outsider, someone who does not belong in their world. His tragedy lies not just in the suffering he endures, but in the rejection he faces because of his uncompromising goodness. In The Idiot, Dostoevsky presents a harsh but poignant critique of society's treatment of pure-hearted individuals. Prince Myshkin's story serves as a reflection of the difficulties faced by those who remain true to their ideals in a world that rewards cunning over compassion. His tragic end highlights the conflict between personal integrity and the harsh realities of a world that often values power and manipulation above all else. In Dostoevsky's The Idiot, the story of Prince Myshkin reflects a painful reality about human nature and the society we live in. Although society claims to respect honesty, kindness, and integrity, in practice, these qualities are not always embraced or valued. In a world full of calculation, power, and competition, truly good people are often seen as weak and vulnerable to exploitation. Prince Myshkin is a completely different character, as he refuses to participate in the societal game of deception and manipulation. Because of this, he is not only ridiculed, but also suffers deeply due to his sincerity. Dostoevsky uses his character to highlight a profound paradox. While society craves good values, it struggles to face and accept the truth about goodness. Myshkin is entirely innocent and sincere, always willing to sacrifice himself for others without considering his own benefit. However, he does not know how, nor does he want to, participate in the strategies of manipulation, deceit, or ruthlessness that society demands. For this reason, in the eyes of society, he becomes a fool, a simpleton, because his naivety and goodness make him vulnerable in a world full of competition, where relationships are often built on mutual exploitation. Although Myshkin can see and feel the good qualities in people, he cannot accept the corruption and deceit surrounding him, which leads to his isolation and suffering. Dostoevsky not only portrays Myshkin's suffering, but also uses him to raise a profound question about society and human nature. Why do good people always face loneliness and suffering? Why are sincerity and goodness often ridiculed and undervalued? The answer is not simple, but The Idiot suggests that society today does not always truly honor the human values that we consider noble. Instead, society seems to prioritize what delivers clear and immediate results, regardless of the means used to achieve those results. This makes good people, like Myshkin, those who are taken advantage of and ultimately rejected in the society they live in. One of the most distinctive aspects of Prince Myshkin's story in The Idiot is how he becomes a mirror reflecting the flaws and deceit of those around him. Myshkin's goodness and sincerity are not passive sacrifices, but rather active forces that challenge and force others to confront themselves. When Myshkin enters a society filled with hypocrisy and calculation, he is not merely a kind-hearted person, but someone who makes others feel uncomfortable and uneasy. This is because his sincerity and goodness are unconditional, without calculation or expectation of anything in return. This makes those around him feel exposed, and they begin to realize the absurdity of their own actions. Myshkin does not need to criticize or judge anyone. Simply existing and living according to his beliefs is enough to make others feel the shortcomings within themselves. His sincerity forces those around him to face the lies and darkness they prefer to ignore. Instead of reassessing themselves, they choose to reject him, even viewing him as incompetent and useless. This is one of the reasons why Myshkin is not accepted in this society. His pure heart and goodness make others uncomfortable, and his very presence disrupts their constructed facades. This reflects a deeper truth about human nature. When we encounter individuals who are too good, sometimes we feel a sense of unease, an inability to align with the ideals they represent. For many, true sincerity and goodness can be discomforting because it forces us to reconsider our own actions and the flaws within ourselves. Myshkin does not demand anything from society, but his mere existence forces others to confront the reality of their own lives. This highlights a paradox. In a society built on strategic relationships and manipulation, goodness without calculation becomes unbearable. Prince Myshkin in Dostoevsky's The Idiot is not just a good person, but someone who challenges society's perception of goodness and sincerity. He lives in a world where everyone wears a mask, where relationships are built on calculation and personal gain. However, Myshkin's goodness does not come from deceit or manipulation, but from a pure heart and a sincere way of life. Because of this, society cannot understand him, and instead of accepting him as a model figure, they see him as a fool. Myshkin does not engage in the game of deceit and pretense. He does not know how to manipulate or craft an image to gain personal advantage, making him extremely vulnerable in a world where people are constantly trying to protect their own interests. While this society values clever strategies and sometimes ruthlessness, Myshkin refuses or cannot participate in this because he does not want to harm others. He is a shining example of unconditional goodness, but this very sincerity becomes the reason for his rejection by society. However, this makes Myshkin's story more complex and profound. Despite being ridiculed and hurt, he does not regret what he has done. Myshkin does not seek validation or affection from society. He does not need praise or acknowledgement to feel that his life has meaning. It is through his steadfast ideals and goodness that Myshkin conveys a powerful message about the value of sincerity in a world that is not always willing to accept it. Myshkin proves that goodness is not always rewarded and can lead to suffering, but the truth is it still holds value and remains important. He does not act in order to receive something in return. He simply acts because it is the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences. Myshkin's goodness is not a naive sacrifice, but a courageous way of living, facing difficulties without backing down. One of the profound messages Dostoevsky conveys through The Idiot is the contradiction between goodness and the suffering that good people endure in a society that does not value these virtues. In the story of Prince Myshkin, the protagonist does not regret his goodness despite facing suffering, betrayal, and loneliness. This not only shows courage in maintaining his ideals, but also reflects a deep truth about human nature. True goodness does not depend on society's recognition. While society may reject or take advantage of good people, Myshkin proves that sincerity and goodness exist not because the world acknowledges them, but because they are simply the right way to live. Myshkin endures suffering, but he also serves as a testament to the latent strength of goodness. Although he is treated unfairly and isolated by society, he never changes his nature. He does not seek praise or rewards. He lives with faith in love, honesty, and the goodness of human beings. It is through this process that Myshkin demonstrates that goodness is not something easily achieved or acknowledged by society, but it still holds value and possesses a certain power. In a world where goodness is often undervalued and scorned, maintaining these virtues is an act of courage. Myshkin's goodness is not naivety, but a steadfast commitment to personal values, despite betrayal or failure. He lives his life with honesty, forgiveness, and unconditional love, qualities that many others in society cannot understand. Through this character, Dostoevsky encourages the reader to reflect on the true value of goodness and the challenges those who uphold these values face in a world full of deceit and challenges. One of the profound lessons Dostoevsky draws from the story of Prince Myshkin in The Idiot is the true meaning of goodness in some world where it is not always rewarded. While good people like Myshkin endure much suffering, rejection, and betrayal, the work does not conclude that goodness is meaningless or a mistake. On the contrary, Dostoevsky shows us that goodness exists because it is the right thing to do, not because of any rewards or recognition it might bring. Myshkin does not seek acknowledgement from society. He simply acts according to his belief in love, truth, and sincerity. Even though all of these things are not reciprocated in a fitting manner, Myshkin does not regret what he has done, even though society treats him like a fool. He lives according to his ideals, without calculating or seeking personal gain. This is in stark contrast to the values that society esteems. Myshkin becomes a model of courage in maintaining noble values in a world full of deceit and manipulation. It is through his steadfastness and goodness that Myshkin proves that although goodness is not always acknowledged by the world, it still holds great power and influence. Myshkin is not a hero in the way society typically views heroes, but it is through the suffering he endures that we see the true value of goodness. He never changes his nature, even in the face of betrayal and harsh trials. He demonstrates that goodness is not something to seek for personal satisfaction, but rather a way of living rightly, regardless of the pain it may bring. This is the great lesson Dostoevsky imparts. Goodness does not require validation from society, but exists because of its intrinsic nature, and that is the most precious thing of all. The important lesson from Prince Myshkin's story in The Idiot is the courage to uphold one's ideals in a world that does not value sincerity and goodness. In today's society, where calculation and personal gain are often prioritized, people like Myshkin, who are always honest, kind, and willing to sacrifice for others, can easily be exploited or isolated. However, Myshkin does not regret his choices, despite enduring suffering and betrayal. This teaches us that no matter how difficult life may be, goodness and sincerity still hold value and do not require societal validation. Sometimes we may feel tired when we are not acknowledged by society, but what matters most is living according to the values we believe in, not for rewards or praise, but because it is the right thing to do. In a world filled with deceit, maintaining goodness is an act of courage, and sometimes that is the very thing that truly sets us apart in our lives.